Hello everyone, this is Nick Hodges. I'm the Delphi Product Manager here at Borland/Devco, and I'm going to do a demonstration here today of some of the basic functionality of the TurboDelphi IDE. The turbos are a new release from Borland, and they're a new market segment for lower end development. I'm going to be doing all the demos today in TurboDelphi for 2006, and the talk today is kind of entitled "What are all those windows?" So as you notice, I've started up TurboDelphi, and you'll notice that there's it's a little bit busy on the screen, and so what I'm going to try and do is show you what all the different panels are, the different parts of the IDE and what they do, and how you can use them and what they're for, and how you can kind of set up the IDE to be in a certain way like you might want it. So the first thing you most notice is the middle screen here. This is the welcome page. And the welcome page has a number of links on it for you, including links to the README, links to installing, but okay, you probably have installed already, links to deploying applications, getting started guides, all kinds of things here. The middle section here is content that will be of use to you if you're a new user, called the Getting Started section here. And you'll notice there's some what's new for TurboDelphi, all different kinds of things. You can take a little tour of the IDE. We'll be doing that here in this demo. Certain questions and different things that you might have starting out. The thing to note, however, is that this middle portion of the welcome page is actually a collection of RSS feeds. Some of them static, i.e. they're on the machine here, but some of them actually are dynamic. So for instance, I can come down and select the Borland Developer Network Delphi page, and as I select that, you'll notice that it goes and gets the live feed from the Borland Developer Network feed and fills that in. If you want to look at the main aggregated feed for the Borland blog site, so the Delphi team feed, you can click here, and you'll notice now that you get the feed from the Delphi team blog site. And you notice a bunch of my blog entries here and a couple of other bloggers from the Delphi team. The other one that might be of interest here is the check for Delphi updates, and as you select this, you'll notice that it lists out some of the hot fixes that are currently out there. So if you're wondering if there's updates to Delphi, you can come to this portion here and look. And these are all dynamically loaded, dynamically updated, so as different hot fixes and whatnot come out, as different blog entries come out, and you hit the refresh on the welcome page, you'll get new information as information is released. The welcome page also is useful for starting new projects, opening existing projects, or getting some help. Another feature of the help page is if I select new project and I select just say a simple VCL Forms application, a new Forms application comes up. If I save this, for instance, just save it out. It doesn't matter at this point what I'm doing. I'll describe some of this later. And then I say File, Close All. You'll notice now that the Recent Projects box is open, and it will list some of the most recently used projects that you've opened in Delphi, and you can quickly access those here. So I'm going to go ahead and open that project back up, and you'll notice now that the welcome page is still here, but now I have a new tab in my in the IDE called Unit 2, and you'll notice this is our form editor, and the current form rests here in the IDE, and it is embedded in the designer. And down at the bottom, you'll notice that there's a code tab here, which lists the code for Unit 2, and this is a basic T-form declaration for a form. Here's a variable to hold an instance of that form, and then the implementation section where the code will be you actually write your code in the implementation, and you declare the interface for that code in the interface section. So you'll notice you can move between code and designer. You can also do that with the F12 key, move between code and designer. I'm pressing the F12 key right now. You can't see that obviously, but that's what I'm doing. So, and now the next thing most people will want to do is they'll want to do some components, drop some components on their form. And you'll notice over here we have the tool palette. The tool palette is a separate window. You can unlock them. I simply grabbed it, dragged it off, and now I can move it around. It'll come undocked. And I can go to the different sections, different tabs here on the tool palette, and bring up different components that can be dropped on the form. So probably the first most basic thing people do is they'll find button. They'll drop a button on the form. Then I'll do the classic demo here. I'll get a team or a list box here, drag that down here, and then I'll drop a regular old edit box here, and now I can easily rearrange and move these. And you'll notice all the way, as an aside, I'll cover these more later in later Camtasias, but you notice that these things have alignments, so I can align them and space them properly according to settings that I have. So let's see, I can move these around so that it looks kind of nice and neat. I can line them up, and that allows me the tool palette. Now the tool palette can be configured in any number of ways. The first thing you can do is you can, as I said, unsnap it and drag it around as a separate window. But if I wanted to dock it, I can dock it next to the project manager. I can dock it here at the bottom of the project manager so that it's in its own section here. I can also unpin it. If I select this unpin, now you'll notice that the tool palette is on the side there. All of these windows that we're covering today will function like this. They can slide out, and then I can pin it back again. I can drag it down and lock it on the bottom of the side here, and dock it inside the IDE itself. And I can open and close each additional item, each of these different tabs in here, and each of them holds different chunks, different types of components, database components, different types of components that you might use to build an application. I can also right-click on this and select Properties, and that'll allow me to set my tool palette properties. And so here's some options that you might want to select. These are my personal preferences, but you can select however you want. One of them I select is Auto Collapse Categories, and what that does is it makes sure that all but the current category is collapsed. So if you open one category, it'll collapse all the others, close all the others. You can also select Show Button Captions, change the layout, show different button sizes and whatnot. But now you'll notice that as I open one, the other ones are closed as well. The other interesting feature of the tool palette is filtering. For instance, if I want to find the button control, I can select the filter by clicking on that little filter, the little funnel there, and now I'm typing B-U-T-T, and you'll notice that as I type B-U-T, the tool palette filters down to components that whose name starts with B-U-T-T, button and button group, and then it's easy to just simply find those and grab one, and if I hit enter, it will simply drop another button on the form. You can also get to the filtering functionality of the tool palette by hitting Control-Alt-P, and that highlights the tool palette. And then again, if I type button, I can backspace, I type edit, it gives me edit box. I type memo, it gives me memo, and media player if I type ME. So that's an easy way to find the tool palette. The other thing you can do here, I should mention just because it is kind of fun, is you can select the properties and right click, select properties, and then of course you can come down here and select some interesting colors. I always like to, for some reason, I like to pick the rainbow, and you get a little more functionality. Another interesting functionality too that you can do if you'd like is you can add a new category, and you might create a category called common items, and then you can take the common items and drag your new category all the way up to the top. You can put it here, and now if you'd like, I can grab, say I'm commonly using edit controls, I can grab, I'm holding the control key down to copy them. I can move the list box, some of the other common controls in here, T button, and I can drop them into the common, and now you'll notice that I've got listings for those components here in the common, and I can move these categories around however I like. I can move them different locations, whatever. So the new tool palette is fully customizable, easily filterable, and so I really like it. Some people seem to think that it's not as good as the past one, but I like it because you can find stuff really easy using Control-Alt-P and just typing the name of a component. So now once you've got some components on the form, you might want to do things to them, and that's where the Object Inspector comes in. So this is the Object Inspector, and what its purpose is to set properties on components. So if I select the Edit button here, you'll notice, or if I, let's say, select the button, T button here, button 1, you'll notice that it changes properties, and if I select the form, it changes the functionality and the properties within the Object Inspector. So for instance, if I want to change the width of this button from 75 to 100, I can enter 100 in and hit enter, and you'll notice now the button is wider. If I want to change the caption of the button, I can change it to press me, and you'll notice that it changes the property. And any number of these, the height, I can change the height, the position, some of the other functionality. By default, the Object Inspector is organized by categories, so that each of the categories is listed here. If you prefer to arrange by name, you can use a more old school viewer. This is some of the version from the older versions, and then the properties are all listed alphabetically by name. And if you even are so inclined, generally you can set it to classic defaults and colors. And this is, if you've been a Delphi user before, this is more along the lines of what you're used to seeing previously in some of the older IDEs, the older versions of Delphi. That's what I like to do. And again, this is a fully dockable window. I can dock it here. I could pin it if I like, and then it expands out, and it'll go back, expand out, go back as you desire it. But that's the Object Inspector. So let's leave that hanging off. The next window you'll see is the Structure window. And the Structure window is interesting because it provides you a structured view of the layout of your code or your form, depending upon the context. You'll notice that the Structure window changes as I move between code and the Designer. The Designer shows a layout of Form 2, which contains buttons, edits, and list boxes. Now if I were to go over here and drop down a panel, grab a T panel and drop it on here, on this control, I can then take other components and put other components. I'm going to drop a label. I'm going to drag a label and drop it on top of the panel, and now you'll notice that the panel here contains the label. And so the structure pane can show a representation of the components and the containers of components on your form. The other thing to note too is that the Object Inspector will also change to reflect the item selected in the structure panel. So sometimes it may be that you might have a form that has a number of embedded controls with panels and panels embedded inside panels, and the easy way to select items inside those more complicated forms would be the structure view. Now if I go over to the code, you'll notice that the structure view now shows me a list of errors in the unit. We haven't compiled this yet, so I'll compile it, Control F9, and that should remove the errors there, yes. And now you'll notice that you'll have a slight class view of a class structure of your code. So for instance, our class here, the class declaration T form, we have a declaration T form over here that lists the published properties of the form, which in this case are the components on top of it. We also list variables, which in this case is Form 2, and it lists the other units that are included in the uses clause. So when the code editor is highlighted, the structure panel will give you a structured view of your code. And finally, over on the upper right here, by default again, is the Project Manager. The Project Manager's job is to manage projects, surprisingly enough, and it will organize for you the units and forms within your application. When you create a new application, it by default gives it a project 1, project 2, whatever number as projects go along, and each new VCL project will have a form and then a DFM file which contains the information about the designer, the form itself, inside of your project. Each individual project can have multiple units, and each project group can have multiple projects. So if I were again to say add new project, I could select again another VCL form application, and now you'll notice that my project group has 2 projects, project 2 and project 3. And the Project Manager allows you to select different files, and for instance, if I were to double click on this file, it would bring up Unit 3 here. And Unit 3, of course, if I hit F12, as I noticed before, will bounce between the form and the unit code for that form. Project Manager also allows you to build all projects and manage projects together I can drag and drop projects, so I can move files from one unit, one project, to another project, take them out, remove them, do different things like that. Allows you to very easily manage your project. Okay, I'm going to remove this project. Put the project manager back over here. Now, I showed you earlier how you can unpin these windows so that they're available on the side. Now, it may be, just as an example of some of the things one of the things you can do with the IDE, that you get your IDE set up in different ways that you like it, and you can then say, well, I'd like to go back to this setup anytime I want it. This is a very code central setup. All my all my windows are slid off to the side, and I want to save this. The Delphi IDE allows you to save different desktop settings. So, for instance, I'm going to save the current desktop as I'm going to give it the name Code Only. So click OK, and now I have the Code Only desktop. If I want to go back to the default layout, which is what we had to start, I can select default layout, and I have all my tool palette, my object inspector, all those things unpinned. But now if I wanted to go back to Code Only, I could select Code Only here, and now you'll notice that I'm looking only at the code editor. So that's a quick rundown on the very basic windows that you see when you start up TurboDelphi, and how you can save different desktop configurations, how you can move the windows around as you wish using the mouse and the pinning of the forms. You can dock individual windows. You can dock them wherever you like. You can actually dock them here underneath the code editor if you like. You can drag them off and have them free floating if you like. So the IDE is very flexible and allows you to configure things, the IDE how you like it to be configured, and then it allows you to save those configurations in the desktop speed settings. So that concludes our quick overview of the IDE. Thank you for your time, and hope you continue to use and enjoy the Turbo products.